right now is basically just to check its health and make sure this thing's still healthy. What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So it's been a little while since we've had the Turbo Civic out. The last time we took this car out, we were setting up boost by gear, and we had it set up to make right around 30 psi at the top of fourth. Well, when we made our last pull, for a lack of better terms, the car started to break up. So we brought the car home, and we've been busy with our other projects, like our big block swap to 3rd gen Camaro, and we've been getting hammered with snow, so the car just kind of sat for a little while. But today we're going to change that. We're going to pull the car up to the garage, check all the plugs in it, see if there's any signs of damage. We're going to do a quick compression test, and if everything checks out, we'll get this thing back out making some boost. So let's get through the intro and jump right into today's video. Now that we've gotten through the intro, let's go move a couple cars, get the Turbo Civic pulled up to the garage, and see what we find. Now that we've got the truck moved out the way, let's go ahead and fire up the Turbo Civic. I'm going to let it warm up a little bit for a couple reasons. A, our compression test should read a little bit more accurate and a little bit higher when it's warm. And B, it'll be a little bit more pleasant to work on since, as you guys can see, this thing is sitting on solid ice. So we'll get it fired up, let it warm up, pull it up here to the garage, and then start pulling plugs. Now that we're in the Turbo Civic here, I'm going to fire this thing up, and we're going to keep an eye on our oil pressure gauge. I just want to see what this thing's reading right now, and then see what it is once we get this thing warmed up. So let's go ahead and fire this thing up real quick. So I'm sure that oil being really thick, it took a second there for it to build up some pressure, but got almost 100 pounds cold. Now when it's hot, it's down more towards like 40 probably, but we'll see what it looks like once this thing warms up. I am gonna let this thing sit here and warm up for a few minutes, and then we'll get it pulled up to the garage. Let's get the plugs pulled out of it and start testing the compression. So the first thing that we're going to do is just pull out all the spark plug wires. We'll get those up out of the way. And then I do have a battery charger on here, just on a lowish amps. I always run one when we do a compression test, just to try to keep the battery up while we're cranking on this thing. So I'm just going to set these off to the side. This one looks like it has some oil in it, so that would be this one too, actually. So we'll have to keep an eye on those. I'll grab a rag real quick. I'm going to take a look down in there, see if we see any major oil. I'm going to try to get in there to suck some of that out before we pull the plug. I do have another valve cover gasket on hand, so we'll probably go ahead and change that because I don't like how much oil is down in there. So let me just get these cleaned off real quick. We'll do our compression test still while it's hot, and then we'll pop the valve cover and change the gasket. There we go. Got all the oil out. Now let's pull the plugs real quick. So I'm going to use this little block that I made a while back. I've showed it on the channel before. I made it for a V8 LS, so you've got a driver's side and a passenger side, and then I just labeled it, and I used a step bit to go down in there, and they actually hold a spark plug perfectly. Obviously, we're just going to need one side of it, so we're going to use this driver's side one right here, and it will help us keep our plugs in order so we know which plug came out of which hole, so that if we find one that has something questionable on it, we know exactly which hole it came out of. So let's go ahead and pull those out real quick and see what they look like. So we got one. This one doesn't look like it's got much oil on it. It looks like there might be a little bit of oil on the actual tip of the spark plug. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's a little oily. Not too bad though. And it doesn't look super sooted up. As you guys know, if you've been following along, I've been learning how to tune using this car. So I'm actually surprised it's not way more sooted up than that. It doesn't look all that bad. It does have a lot of idle time on it and stuff like that, but all in all, doesn't look that bad, just a little bit on the oily side. So we'll set this one in our little block here. Just like so. Pull our number 2. This one looks drier for sure. Looks like maybe there's a little bit on the very tip there. Not bad though, nothing crazy. We'll probably just throw these plugs back in it, honestly, because we have some new bigger injectors on the way from our buddies over at Clean Injection. So we'll probably throw these back in it just to get the car running and dialed in on our new injectors, and then the new set I have we'll swap in there once we get it a little bit more dialed in, so we don't file out a brand new set of plugs. So let's set these off to the side, do the next one. This one might get some oil on it just from the residual that's still down in there. Yeah, that one's got some oil on it, but I think that was from pulling it out. Yeah, this one got oil on it just from us pulling it out. You would be able to tell if this thing was burning oil that bad, you'd see it on the plug itself. It'd be kind of like gummed up almost, and that doesn't look like this thing's been burning oil. So let's go ahead and set this one in our block. Probably have the same thing on this next one, just from that oil that's in there still. Yeah, that one's got oil on it from being pulled out too. You can tell because it's all over the top part of the spark plug, not so much down there. I'm actually kind of surprised because that valve cover gasket's not that old. We did change it a while back when I checked valve lash and stuff. I don't really feel like checking it today, so as long as none of them seem extremely loose, we'll probably just leave it at what it's at. It seems pretty quiet and happy. But the plugs themselves don't look that bad for how long they've been in here. Me learning to tune and a bunch of 30 psi pulls, they don't look too bad at all. Oily, obviously, from us just pulling them out, but they don't look extremely fouled from fuel or all carboned up or any oil that's been burning on them, so that's a good sign. We'll go ahead and set these off to the side. I'll probably hit them with some brake clean real quick before we put them back in, but these will be perfectly fine, I think. I don't think these are causing us any issues. The next thing I'm gonna do is just unplug our injectors real quick so they're not spraying fuel while we're doing our compression test. We'll just carefully unplug all of these. Set those off to the side for a minute. So we're just about all set up to do our compression test. I've got our battery charger hooked up to the car just to keep the battery voltage up, but there are a couple different ways you can go about doing this. So you can reach in and crank the engine over until you see the gauge pump 3 times and then stop right there. Or you can do it the way that we're gonna be doing it. I'm gonna get in the car, hold my foot on the throttle so that the throttle blade is all the way open, and then we're gonna continue to crank the engine until it no longer builds a higher pressure. So it might be 5 or 6 times or so, and then it should kind of just level off and not continue to build anymore. So that's the number that we're gonna be writing down. Now, what I'm looking for here today is just consistency across all 4 holes. We don't have a certain target in mind because this is an Eagle rod, but they're stock length, and then Vitara pistons, and we do have a Comp 59-300 cam. So all of those things are going to lower the compression, which will throw our cranking compression number all over the place. So as long as they are at or above what they were when we first put the engine in, which I have written down somewhere, or that they are all consistent with each other, then we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and get the gauge hooked up. We'll start cranking this thing over and see what kind of numbers we get. Get that threaded down nice and snug. Don't have to go too crazy with it. Clip our gauge on, just like so. I'm going to try to put this somewhere so that I can kind of see it from the driver's seat, so I can see when it stops, but that might not be totally possible, so we'll just put it somewhere right in there for now and see if I can see it. Now I'm going to go crank this thing over until it stops building more pressure. Looks like we got about 154, so I'll go ahead and write that down and we can move on to the next one. About 154 as well, so let's write that down and we'll move on to cylinder number 3. About 154 again as well. Not sure if you guys can see that, but just about 154, between 154 and 155. That one's about 152, I'd say. So 2 psi less than the rest. So that's a really good sign, guys. This thing seems to be nice and healthy as far as compression goes. So I'm gonna write down that number. We have a little book that I write all of our compression tests in. I date them and put the mileage that our new engine is at, just so we can keep track of it. So if anything ever changes in the future, we can see if there's a pattern or anything like that. But we'll go ahead and write down our 152. We can put the plugs back in it so that nothing gets in there. And then I'm gonna pull this valve cover and see if I have another gasket. And we'll go in there, change that to see if we can fix that oil leak. Go ahead, plug our injectors back in so I can't forget them later. All right, put my compression tester away. We'll throw the plugs back in it, and then I'll go look for a new valve cover gasket. So since we are having issues with this thing breaking up and we have the plugs out anyways, I do have new plugs, but these ones don't look that bad. And like I was saying before, I want to use these for the new injectors that we have coming in from our boys over at Clean Injection. So I want to use these ones to get the new injectors dialed in, and then we'll put the new ones in once we get the tune figured out, at least at idle and stuff like that. But I am going to go ahead and use our spark plug gap tool here. If you guys have never used one before, it's actually really nice and handy. So since we're running about 30 pounds of boost with our current setup with a stock ignition system, just aftermarket plugs and wires, we do want to gap this thing pretty close for the boost that we're running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an 018 feeler gauge. We're going to put that in there. We're going to crank this thing down pretty much tight on that feeler gauge. We'll back it off, take our 20 and just check it, and it's right about at 20. That's close enough for what we need here. So I like to go down about 002, and then when you let up, the spring back gives you about what we're looking for here. So that's going to be perfect for what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and gap the rest of them like this, and then we'll get them thrown in. So I just went and looked through our pile of new parts, and I did find a brand new valve cover gasket that looks like it has all the grommets. So we're going to go ahead and get this valve cover pulled off. We'll bring it inside where we have some heat, and we'll get all of the seals in here popped out of it and put a whole new gasket kit on here. Oh yeah, there's oil in there for sure. These two are fine. These ones have a ton of oil in them. They must have ripped or something. Yeah, must have. I just checked valve lash here recently, so I'm just going to give it a quick look over. I know I set the lash good. I'm just going to see if any of them feel excessively loose or anything. I think they're pretty good, guys. Everything else in here looks really good. I don't see any foaming, milking, discoloration or anything like that. It is funny looking at this thing. We've been working on our big block Camaro project. These valve springs are so tiny, and these are aftermarket Crowder valve springs. They're beefier than stock. But just looking at these compared to those big block ones, and just the size of the valves, is kind of funny when you look at the two next to each other. But we're gonna go ahead, give it a quick look over like I said, then we'll get our new gasket installed on the valve cover and get this thing back on. All right. Let's go ahead and get the plug wires back on, and this thing's ready to fire up. Put our 10 AN breather back on. Alright, check the oil, and this thing's ready to fire. Now that we've got the valve cover back on, there is another thing that we need to address before we take this thing out. Now, if you guys seen the short that I did a little while back with one of our snowstorms, I was trying to bash this thing to get it out, and the bumper got caught on some snow when I was backing up, and it ripped it out. It was already messed up here. I had a self-tapper holding it in, but since it ripped my self-tapper out, before I just put another one in it, I'm gonna try using a riv nut, which is basically just a nut insert. You drill a hole, this goes in, and just like a rivet, it expands when you use the special tool, and then it seals itself or bites itself against whatever you put it into, and then it gives you a nice threaded surface to try to tighten something up in. So we're gonna go ahead and try to use one of those in here if I can. If I can't, we can always go back to the self-tapper route. I just figured that with a bolt and a washer might be a little bit of a better bet than just self-tappers. So first thing I need to do is tap this little spot right here flat so we can have at least half a chance of drilling it. Somewhat flat. I'm going to start with a step bit, and then I'll have to switch over to a regular bit. I'm going to try this to see if it'll get the hole going for us. Looks like it did. We'll give that a shot just how it is. Not sure if this is actually going to bite with how that is, but we'll try it. Hopefully we can get this thing in there. No, that ain't gonna work with this one, I don't think. Let me grab my other riv nut tool and see if that one will do it. Got my other riv nut tool out. This one's bigger, obviously, but it's harder to get in tight spaces. Let's see if that's nice and tight, or if we gotta try a different one. Alright guys, so as you can tell, it is the next day and it's starting to snow on us here a little bit, but last night I ended up calling it quits. It was like 5 degrees out here. I was absolutely freezing and it was getting dark to the point where it was really hard to film, but I did go ahead and finish getting that passenger side of the bumper mounted up, and now this thing is nice and solid. It's definitely not going anywhere. We used to have self-tappers holding both sides, but when I was trying to get this thing out of the snow, in our YouTube short that we did, it ripped the front bumper on this side right off of there, as you guys seen. But now we have a 10mm bolt in there with a nutsert, and that thing is more solid than it's ever been. The other side seems to be holding up just fine with the self-tapper for now, but once we take this thing off, once it gets a little bit warmer out, we'll go ahead and do the same thing to that side so that we know this thing's nice and solid. And while we have it off, we'll also go ahead and re-plastic weld up this crack. When we got the car, that crack was there. I plastic welded it. It looked pretty good for a while until I ripped it off in the snow. So like I said, when it's a little warmer out, we'll go ahead and get that pulled out and probably add some more nutserts down here because that bottom piece is a little bit loose and floppy. So we'll worry about that though when it gets a little warmer. So as of right now, we've checked the plugs, we've done a compression test. I did go ahead and give the coolant a quick look, and so far everything seems to be good. Everything is pointing to this thing being healthy. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm just going to check the tire pressure real quick because I haven't driven it in a while, but then we'll get this thing fired up, let it warm up, and go take it for a ride. Now I am going to plug my laptop in. We'll probably turn boost by gear off for the moment, and I'm going to turn this thing down to probably 10 or 15 pounds. We'll do a rip, see how it feels. If everything seems healthy and everything's on point, we'll turn it up a little bit and see if it stays that way. So let's get this thing fired up, warm it up, and go take it for a rip. All right, let's get this thing fired up. It is absolutely freezing out today again, but we'll let this thing warm up for a second. And then once we get some heat in it, we'll go take it for a ride. All right guys, now that we got this thing warmed up, it looks like we're at 188 degrees, which is looking good. Now I am gonna go ahead and disable our boost by gear for a minute. Like I was saying before, we're gonna run it on fixed duty cycle for now so that we can just set it at a certain PSI, make a couple pulls, see if it seems healthy, and then come back through and turn it up a little bit, quick and easy. So I'm gonna drop this all the way down to 53% duty cycle. And then we'll go down to our quick spool, because I have those turned all up for our other gears. We're gonna leave quick spool off for first gear, probably leave it off for second gear for now. And then third gear through fifth gear, we're gonna change that from 12, 15, 14 to just 10 across the board. So we'll do Control J, set that at 10. Now if you guys want to know more about quick spool or how we set up our boost by gear table, go back and check out our previous videos. I have some pretty in-depth videos on there of how we set all that stuff up, how it works, and how we're using it. But for now, we're just going to use a fixed duty cycle at 53%, quick spool at 10 PSI, and we'll go out and rip this thing. All right, let's go take this thing for a ride, guys. I haven't driven this thing in a while. See how it drives. The goal right now is basically just to check its health and make sure this thing's still healthy. Everything we've checked so far says it is. Oil pressure is about 30 PSI when it's been sitting there idling for a long time. So I'm not sure if that's a little bit low, but as soon as you give it some throttle, like right now it's at 60 PSI at 2,500 RPM, so actually 65 PSI. So oil pressure seems to be okay, but let's go ahead, hop on with this thing and see what it does. Just gonna roll into it in third first and see what we get. Like it made about 15 PSI, didn't break up or anything, it felt pretty healthy. We'll do the same thing in fourth, roll into it a little bit. Plenty healthy. It's not breaking up or anything. It actually feels smoother than it did last time I was in this thing. AFRs were between 11.0 and 11.5, so AFRs are looking good, and this thing seems to be really happy on that like 15 PSI mark. We'll take a quick look at the log and just make sure everything seems good, and then we'll take it back out and see how it does. Alright, I'm going to take a look at this log real quick, see if there's anything in there that interests us, and then we'll take it out for another ride. So looking at this log real quick, it looks like we made right about 17 PSI at our peak at about 6,300 RPM in third gear. So everything looked good there. AFR was plenty close. Our duty cycle for the injectors are only at about 65% at 17 PSI at 6,300 RPM. And our boost controller duty cycle was right at 51%. So everything looks good here. I'm not seeing anything scary or anything that's making me think this thing isn't healthy, but we are going to go ahead and turn the duty cycle up just a little bit more, make another rip, and see if it continues that way. I'm not going to go crazy here. I'm just going to go up to 55, and then we'll change our quick spool around a little bit. Since we know it made 16, we can set this at like 14 for now. Actually, we can do that right across the board. We went ahead and set our quick spool at 14 PSI across the board, and our duty cycle is at 55%. So let's go ahead, take it for another ride, and see how it does. Going into third so bad. Feels plenty healthy. And AFR on my gauge is right at 11.5. might have set our quick spool too close to our target boost. So I'll have to take a look at that real quick. But I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at that log and we will go from there. Still blows the tires off in second, that's for sure. Especially on a wet road today. When I set up my boost by gear, I was able to almost completely get rid of that, which was nice for actually getting traction and going, but it's definitely a lot more fun to be able to just blow the tires off at will. So there's that. So we'll take a look at this first one here. I think I was in third gear. We floored it. Boost control kept the gate pin shut until we got to our target. Then it did 53%. Looks like we made just about 20 PSI. And I'm looking at the AFR because it looked to be right on 11.5 looking at our gauge. And as you guys can see here, 11.42, that's very close to what I was seeing. But 11.1, 11.4, 5. Yeah, so on this one, the gauge and the log look like they match up perfectly. 11.5 pretty much throughout the whole pull. But looks like we made a peak of just under 20 PSI. Injector duty cycle was at 73%. Third gear, 53% boost controller duty cycle, and 6,500 RPM. So everything looks really good right there. I'm not seeing anything that scares me or makes me think that this thing is hurt, which is an awesome thing. But then if we look at that next log, I think I was in fourth gear in this one. I was. So in fourth gear, we floored it. And as you guys can see, we have dips right here. That was that surging that we seen or we felt, and it would just keep opening and closing the gate. So like I said, I'll just go ahead and make a couple quick changes to our quick spool and or our duty cycle, because this surge was 100% self-induced. But if we look at that first log, everything looked really smooth. Everything looked really happy. I don't see anything that's standing out at me as if we have an issue. So definitely helped prove what we were trying to see today. I just wanted to verify that there was nothing weird going on with this thing or that it wasn't hurt, because like I said, last time we had it out, it did some funky stuff. All right, guys, so as you seen yesterday in those data logs, everything is looking really good. The only thing I seen was the little bit of surge, but that was 100% self-induced. Now, I was gonna call it right there because those logs looked really healthy, but today it's much nicer out. It's really warm, all the snow's starting to melt, and I think the roads are gonna be a little bit drier. So I decided to go ahead and re-enable our boost by gear, and we'll take this thing out and make another rip. Now, if you guys want to see more on how we have our boost by gear set up, you can go back and check out the boost by gear video. I have a full video explaining how we have our setup and how we're utilizing it. But for now, I'll just give you a quick look at how we have our table set up. So if we take a look at the file real quick, you guys can see for first gear, we're just commanding 0. So whatever it's going to make on gate spring, which should be right around 6 to 7 PSI. Now you can go in here and set it up off of each RPM column as well. But for what we're doing, I just have it set strictly per gear. So first gear is 0, second gear is 40%. Third gear is 55%, fourth gear is 58%, and then fifth gear is 55%. Now, I did go ahead and change our quick spool around a little bit. I just bumped it down so that we shouldn't have that surging anymore. So let's go ahead, get this thing fired up. I'll let it warm up for a minute, and we'll go take it for another rip. Like I said, guys, I'm gonna let it warm up for a few minutes here, and we will go take it for a rip. Like it surged on us again, only in second gear though, so I must have had my quick spool set too high once again, so I'll go ahead and change that real quick, see if I can do it. All right, so we should be good. I just changed it, lowered it to 5 PSI. It doesn't seem to like quick spool in second gear very much, especially when we have our duty cycle set so low to keep it from spinning the tires. So let's go ahead and try that again. Our intake air temp on this thing stays almost ambient. We're just running a cheap eBay intercooler, but it's like a 4-inch thick bore. So it actually does pretty good as far as IATs go. Felt super smooth, guys. Like super smooth. The shifting, this transmission is on borrowed time 100%. The transmission feels absolutely god awful horrible, but as far as the tune and the engine health is concerned, that felt dialed. I did take a log of it, so I'll look at that real quick, but I didn't feel any surging. The power felt very smooth, the power delivery. The car felt very happy. So I think as far as our tuning goes, I think it's pretty dialed as long as the AFR was good. I wasn't really able to keep as close of an eye on that as I would have liked, but as of right now, this thing seems super healthy. Let's take a quick look at that log. Alright guys, so as you've seen, the Turbo Civic is back to running better than ever. This thing is absolutely flying. I don't see any hint of a miss anymore. It seems smooth as can be, and this thing absolutely rips. Now, I'm not exactly sure what our main issue was. The only thing we changed was tightened up the gap on the spark plugs, and we got that little bit of oil that was down in the spark plug tubes out. So I'm not sure if that oil was causing the plug or the boot to short out, and it wasn't giving the spark it needed to the plug under a high load or high RPM situation. But other than that, I'm not sure what was causing it, because this thing is running better than ever, and it is absolutely flying, which is definitely a good thing, because we have some more good news for the Turbo Civic. Clean Injection decided to hop on board once again and send us another set of their injectors, which we are super excited to try out. Wait until you guys see these things. They look absolutely sweet. They sent us out a set of their CI 1500cc injectors, and now that we have those, that means we can finally turn the Turbo Civic over to E85, which I've been wanting to do ever since we built the turbo kit for this car in the first place. So huge shout out to Clean Injection for getting those sent out to us. We really appreciate it, and we can't wait to get them installed on the Turbo Civic and start making some boost on E85. Now, once we get the injectors installed, we'll get them dialed in, and then we'll start wiring up our flex fuel kit and get this thing ready to accept E85. Now, on to another note, the big block swapped 3rd gen Camaro that you guys can see right here behind me. We do still have some engine parts over at the machine shop, but as soon as we get those back, we'll start putting the big block back together so we can get it dropped down into the Camaro, and we can start building our turbo kit, which I am also super excited to get started on that. So we've got a whole bunch of stuff going on here on the channel in the upcoming weeks. So make sure to stick around, make sure you're subscribed so that you guys see all of this stuff as it comes out. Now, on to another thing. If the editing in this video wasn't exactly up to par or perfect, please bear with me. I am trying out a new editing software that I think is going to work out better for us in the future, but I obviously have some learning to do, and I've got to learn the little ins and outs of this stuff. So bear with me on this video and maybe the next video or two. But as always, I appreciate you guys for checking out the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, and check us out on all of our other social media platforms, Facebook, TikTok, and Bought to Build Official on Instagram. And we will catch you on the next one.